Welcome to the 29th episode of the Illegally Science of the Face Football Podcast. How are you doing, Jake?
Oh, great, Hayden. How are you?
Tremendous. I'm actually ticked off, though. I'm really not happy about this week one schedule much at all. I'm not a fan of what they've put out so far. We'll get to the rest of the schedule later, but today we're talking about the Bengals, and we'll touch on this week one, basically disaster, I think,
hmm
for the moment.
Yeah, a lot of those week one games do not look good. It there's some that I'm interested in, but for the most part, a lot of them are garbage.
It's really amazing. What they determine is like good football and what is not. Okay, the Monday night game at the beginning of the year, Baltimore at Las Vegas. Okay, they have a good team coming to Las Vegas for the first time. I think the first time that the stadium will be fairly packed in. So I guess that's good. Get them a live audience for that first game of the year because or a big, sorry, live audience for that first game of the year because they want to kind of have a real introduction to their stadium since they didn't really get to last year. Um, but looking at the Sunday games and the Thursday game, I'm not happy with these at all. Chicago at Los Angeles. Yes, I'm excited to see Los Angeles, but I am not at all excited to see Andy Dalton on Sunday Night Football, week one of the season. I don't think that game will be fun to watch at all.
No, if anything, it'll just be Andy Dalton getting bullied week one, so then the Bears have an excuse to put Justin Fields in the next week. And I mean, we've seen Matt Stafford just not tear up because he's been on the Lions, but like have good games against NFC North teams, even recently, especially with how good that Bears defense is. We're just going to be seeing more of the same. And I understand that it's again another new stadium that they probably want to get a big crowd in there, introduce well, not introduce LA to football again because they've done that. So, but have the new stadium there because I think the Chargers football team game would be a better Sunday night
I
game to have in
completely
there.
agree with you. I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. Thing is, that one's in Washington, obviously, because they
hmm
can't play there the same week. No,
Yes.
yeah, but I mean, my argument too. We talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on the pod a few days ago, but I mean, like, I look at that like Carolina New York game. Those are two teams that are every team needs to get at least one primetime game. I don't know how many Carolina's going to get. New York is New York, so they'll get more than one even if they suck. But the thing that is there that you have to discuss is like, okay, but that matchup has some really interesting storylines, and it's nice to get it week one. But why can't we get that on primetime football? Probably not the Sunday night game. Maybe put the Baltimore Vegas game as the Sunday night game and then make that maybe the Monday night game or something because that's a game you at least have storylines with and you could take two bad teams that probably won't be good this season whereas if you pushed it later into the season it wouldn't be as interesting of a matchup and you should really I would think it would be a great opportunity to get those bad teams get their primetime games early while they're still interesting and haven't lost too many games yet.
Yeah. It's just for views and everything too. You're going to draw in so many more people if you have these bad teams playing their one primetime game because you and I both agree on that every team should get at least one primetime game.
Yeah.
And so you get the bad teams out of the way first 5 6 weeks when they're still competing for something, and then after that you have the like actual good teams playing in the primetime games. And even the first 6 weeks, it's still competitive football because teams are still playing for something, and you have storylines in a bunch of games with between bad teams that would be interesting to watch.
The thing is, you also have this awesome thing where you're allowed to flex games in the NFL. So even if you have a team that you're expecting to be terrible all year, it doesn't matter because if they get good and we weren't expecting them to be a good team, we can go late into the season and say, hey, they got an important game, flex them in. But instead, sometimes later in the season, they'll get lackadaisical with the flex rule and they'll just be like, well, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example from last season. I mean, there were some games that just didn't belong on Sunday Night Football as late in the season as they were. There are every year. They have the opportunity to flex them, and they just don't because they don't
hmm
feel like it, and it's stupid. And then lastly, I'm not really going to complain about any of the 1 or 4 o'clock games. besides that. I mean, Cleveland and Kansas City, how the heck are you not arguing for that to be a primetime game, too? That one's a freaking great game. Or at least put it in a different week of the season so that it can be a primetime game. Why is that a 4 o'clock game? Those are two really good teams. One of the best teams in the league in Kansas City the past 2 years. And Cleveland, who made it to the divisional round, competed with Kansas City and only got better this offseason. I don't see how you could say that should be locked in at a 425 game. That should be nationally televised.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But is that on Fox or CBS?
That's a CBS game.
So it's not even America's Game of the Week.
Nope.
What's America's Game of the Week then?
Probably Green Bay and New Orleans, because I doubt it's Denver Giants.
Goodness.
Would have said the cities, but New York isn't necessarily clear.
Yeah.
And then last game that I want to touch on for these week ones is Dallas Tampa Bay. I don't know. I don't know the numbers well enough to see who actually watches games more. The Cowboys must draw a larger audience, but in terms of actually wanting the best game that would be played of the opponents that Tampa Bay had, for options that are coming to town, going to Tampa Bay, I don't know how Buffalo is not the best option. It must just be that the crowd that gets drawn by the Cowboys is so huge, and I underestimate it too much. But the Cowboys can't stop anything. If the Cowboys don't score on offense twice, the game is over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how exciting is that? I mean, maybe they'll be better on defense this year, but week one, you think their defense is going to be prepared to go against Tom Brady, Tampa Bay, and everything they've got going on a hot streak? I don't know about that. I doubt that.
Yeah, and the betting odds for that game are ridiculous. It's the second highest differential. I think it's -6
of a week one game.
Yeah, the season opener. See, it's ridiculous. It's so bad. It's so bad.
I don't know. I know 2 seasons ago when the Bills started to get hot, we were drawing pretty good attention, even though we're a smaller market team whenever we did get on primetime games. I don't know if that dropped off last year because it was kind of like people knew we were on the scene now or not. But I just can't imagine that that's going to be a great game. Because, I mean, I don't know. What are they going for? Do they want people to actually sit? Here it is. Here's the question. Do they want people to actually sit through the whole game? Or do they want people to just show up initially? Because if you just want people to show up initially, you go with the Cowboys. If you want people to actually stay for the whole game, I think you go with the Bills. And I don't know how you can value just initial show-ups more than actually maintaining an audience.
It's just because the statistic is, the viewership peaked at this number, and it's not really viewership maintained a steady pace at this number because they're only going to show the one that peaked. They always show the one that peaked.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but man, I do have to say, I heard this a while ago, and I like this, and I like hearing him say this, but I don't know how true it is with what we're talking about right here. In that Roger Goodell says, he's asked, Roger, who do you root for in the NFL? He says the team that's losing. And honestly, when we're not watching the Bills, I love that concept. I do that with most games that I'm watching. I'm rooting for the team that's losing. But it's come on. Do you really expect the team, if Dallas drops, like I said, if Zeke fumbles a few times, which he sure did a lot of last season, or Dak makes one mistake. Dak's impressive, but geez, one mistake and a Zeke fumble could literally end this game in the first quarter. If they happen on the first 2 drives, the game's over. Because what are they going to do to stop Tampa?
No, yeah, they have no defense. It's just going to be Tom Brady at the shooting range all day, hitting wide open guys, and then he has to worry about the 6 linebackers that the Cowboys have doing anything to him.
Yeah,
and
they can only put 3 on the field at a time.
Yeah, but they made sure to draft 3 more and then make Keanu Neal switch to linebacker.
Yep. All right, let's get to the Bengals because we did take a long time talking about just week 1.
Yes.
You want me to? So this is the fifth breakdown we're doing. So are we back to you first, or I can't remember.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first.
Right.
the Bengals finished their season 4-11-1. That tie is just beautiful. That game was beautiful between the Eagles. That was amazing.
You watched that
Uh,
one back?
I did. It was an extra game just because I was like, oh, what game did they tie? I was like, oh yeah, that Eagles game. So let me watch that, and it's pitiful. But it wasn't one of the first main four that I watched. I watched the Chargers, the Jags, the Titans, and the football team game. Those were the four that I watched.
Okay,
Uh,
we basically watched all different ones except for the football team one. I watched the football team one too.
okay. Uh, I only had a couple of notes to make on it, just without including statistics right away. But that team was so broken last year. Just injuries were bad. Like the obvious one, Joe Burrow, but injuries just all over that team. They were wheeling AJ Green out there to do something with uh Ryan Finley at quarterback and who is the other guy? Oh my goodness.
Brandon Allen.
Brandon Allen. Just, yeah, AJ, we know you can't feel your knees anymore, but why don't you just go out there and catch some balls when we're going to lose by 30? It's ridiculous seeing that happen.
Yeah.
And then with that, before his injury, Joe Burrow was just fighting for his life out there. That there was a play that I saw where he's like rolling out, shakes off two tackles, runs out, and then just gets thumped out of bounds by someone, and it just makes me put my face in my hands. Like he's doing everything, and he's not like he shouldn't have to. Like the receiving core is so good. That was my last note. The receiving core is so good, but he just had no line. He had nothing else besides receivers.
I know.
They had a good problem. They had a good problem. We need to protect Joe. Okay, so that's our one priority. But we have the playmakers. We have the quarterback. Our defense is all right. We just need to get a line in front of this guy so he can drop back like 40 times a game and get it to these guys that can make plays. And they decided to do the exact opposite of that.
Man, and I saw something about the Bengals the other day where it's like not only did they like not protect him in the games that I watched, but I didn't watch a game until week 6, and then actually every game I watched after week 6 was week 11, 12, and 15. So like I watched the games later in the season. I was watching a video the other day on YouTube that said a guy, I can't remember who made the video, so sorry, I can't give him credit, but it's just talking about like the personnel that the Bengals were using early in the season, and it's like they were going empty like all the time. Like no help, Joe, because he went empty at LSU, so let's go empty in the NFL, and he's just getting slaughtered out there, like even worse than these other games. And yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Here, I'll go through my notes. I shortened them up today a little bit. I didn't go over the top crazy. Still a lot though. The first thing I have to say that was just absolutely stupid is that the Fox broadcast in the Colts game. The Colts game was the first game I watched. Giovanni Bernard scores a touchdown, and they have a mustache on his like cartoon character thing. And I was like, did they literally just put a mustache on him because his name's Giovanni? Because I don't remember ever seeing him with a mustache.
Oh, he had a big mustache. He had a big mustache last season.
Man, I missed it. That's too bad. I hope he has it again. I hope I see him in some press conferences down in Tampa Bay because they have like nobody, right? I'm sure he'll get a lot of press conference time. And then they go out and they start this Colts game somehow leading 21-0, and then they basically immediately like lose that giant lead they created. And it's just like some of the swings in games last year were absolutely crazy just because of the lack of fans. Like it was like I don't know, there was less emotion in the buildings, and somehow that made it easier to swing the tide in the losing team's favor, which was interesting, but at the same time it was scary a lot for a lot of teams. T. Higgins honestly looks so much better in the NFL than he did in college. I have no idea what changed about his game, but I mean, he looks a heck of a lot more athletic. I mean, he looked like he didn't know how to run in college, and now he's like out there. Now he's out there looking like an elite level receiver. Jesse Bates III is one of the most underrated players in the league. Complete ball hawk. I mean, I don't know how. I feel like I talk about him so much. To me, it's like he's not underrated, but honestly, I don't know how much the general fan knows about him. I really don't watch this team and think they need a receiver at all. The O-line gets absolutely killed in every one of the games I watched. Every single one of them, the offensive line gets absolutely destroyed. I mean, the quarterback's going to the first read. If the first read isn't open, he gets sacked. How much worse can it get than that? You don't even have an opportunity to go to read number 2. It's terrible. Tyler Boyd's also really good, but we know that. You know what was a really weird concept to me when I got to the Washington game? The fact that going into the Washington game, the Bengals had a better record than the Washington football team. Did you realize that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, pretty weird, huh? Just protect him with 3 exclamation points, you know. It's not even like he holds the ball long. Jesse Bates got 2 picks in the first 2 games I watched. I think he's the first player that actually had multiple turnovers in games that I watched because I've only watched 4 for every team. So, I mean, that's pretty good. Randy Bullock was suspect. Man, not many guys do much on this defense except for Jesse Bates. And that changes later, but I mean, just the only guy that jumps off the screen when you're watching this defense consistently is Bates. Finley comes in and immediately gets smacked just like Burrow, so that doesn't make any sense. Then I got to the Giants game, and the only thing that really ticked me off that these guys did in the Giants game is that Evan Ingram kept lining up as a wide receiver on the outside. And if they were having linebackers cover him and they beat them deep, he beat them deep, I wouldn't be too upset. But they've got safeties covering him, and there was twice in the game where he beat safeties deep. And it's like, what do you guys watch film? Do you realize that he's a tight end, but he's one of the fastest tight ends in the game. Realize who you're playing against. Von Bell and someone else. Who was the other guy? Oh, Brandon Wilson. Both of them at the safety position, both of them got beat deep on this, and this was just ridiculous. It was terrible. And then, of course, both of them made up for those mistakes, but I just couldn't believe that. That was really bad. That's just game planning stuff. I'm like, what do you, like, I don't know if I can put that on players, but, I mean, it's got to be on coaches, because these guys are forced to go to meetings. How can they not know that Evan Ingram is fast enough to run past them? Because twice, he scorched 2 safeties. It was stupid. Brandon Wilson scored a kick return touchdown, which was good, but honestly, besides that, he really wasn't, when I talk about the stats later, he wasn't much of a success in the return game besides that one. Not too much, at least. And then Von Bell makes up for his mistake by having a nice forced fumble, actually, and that was important in the game. Sean Williams' fake punt was converted in this game. It was just really weird. Zach Taylor faked a punt down 13-10 with 16 minutes left in the game from like his own like 15-yard line. 4th and 3. Does that seem a little overly aggressive? Because that seemed overly aggressive to me. 15-yard line. You're down 3. The other team hasn't been able to put significant points on the board, and you're about to give them the ball in the red zone if you fail to convert this. I don't think that's worth the payoff. So, coaching-wise, I'll just throw that in there. Sometimes even the right decisions you have to question. That is, I don't think that one's worth the trade-off. Maybe if you were closer to midfield, but geez, like your own 15, that's tough. Ben Von Bell also got a nice tackle for a loss. And I basically only talked about safeties in the Giants game, so I'm sorry about that. And then Von Bell was also the guy who absolutely kill-shotted Juju Smith-Schuster. So, I mean, he really made up for it. So, the more I got into it, the second guy on this defense that I started enjoying watching that was actually making some plays besides Jesse Bates was Von Bell. So I initially crucified him for that first mistake, but no, he's pretty good. I should be honest. You could tell Juju is a huge motivator for the Bengals, though, because when Mackenzie Alexander picks off Roethlisberger, and then he has the opportunity to take it back for a big return, instead he goes out of bounds so that he can high step out of bounds like 10 yards before he's off the field, and that was just so funny. That Juju thing was it's just wonderful. I love the storylines Juju creates. I don't want him on my team at all, though. Honestly, the Steelers are so boring to watch, though. Love Ryan Finley's speed. He's not on the team, though, so that's not really a big deal. And the last note I have that is kind of involving a stat, because literally every game I watched, the first game I watched was the game Joe Mixon got injured, and then he basically didn't play again. He didn't play again all year. I don't know why I'm saying basically. He didn't play again all year. And then basically every game I watched, they went exclusively Gio Bernard from that point on. So Gio's gone. So RB2 is kind of up in the air for questioning, but I mean, I would just say that I think they've kind of got some good ideas for what they're going to go with RB2 and kind of a receiving type back too.
Yeah, that's well, besides their entire offensive line, that's kind of the biggest question mark on that team is running back too. Uh, got any fun stats you want to rattle off?
I have a decent amount actually. Yeah, I've got a fairly hefty amount. Sorry. Burrow was on pace to throw for 4,400 yards. Mixon and Gio Bernard averages. Mixon was better, 3.6 yards per carry versus Gio's 3.4 yards per carry. But the key here is that Samaje Perine actually averaged 4.8 yards per carry for these guys. And it wasn't on a very low number. It was on a lower number of attempts, but it wasn't on an extremely low number of attempts. 63 carries. That's pretty good production. So I think he could hop into that RB2 role. The only thing here is that then, which is a guy I'll discuss later, is kind of Mixon and Pirine aren't really the two guys I think of as the receiving backs, but I think they kind of filled that hole in the draft. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd both had 800 plus yards receiving. If they got Auden Tate back on the field, he would have filled in AJ Green's role fine, but instead we're drafting Jamar Chase instead of O-lineman. Drew Sample, they need more tight end production, but he's still relatively young, so they can kind of hope that he progresses a little more. Brandon Wilson had that one good return that I talked about in the Giants game, but besides that, he was averaging less than 23 yards per return on kickoffs, which wasn't very threatening at all, so I think they should probably look for a new guy in that department. And honestly, Alex Erickson is probably one of the least threatening punt returners in the league as well, so I'd try to figure that out. This team was great on extra points, which is weird to say nowadays because extra points seemingly aren't even close to automatic anymore. But as a team, they were only 79% on field goals, and they added a kicker in the draft, so I think that's a good thing. And then stats for defensive guys. Jesse Bates III, 3 interceptions, 15 passes defended. Darius Williams and William Jackson both had 10 plus passes defended, so good job from them. Didn't really notice them on the field that much when I was watching, but I mean, those are good numbers. Von Bell had 3 forced fumbles. And the only players with 100 plus tackles on the team, there were 2 guys with 100 plus tackles on the team. Do you have any idea who they would be?
Uh, Jesse Bates and some linebacker probably.
Nope, not the second one.
Von Bell.
Yep.
Both
Von
the
Bell
safeties.
and Jesse Bates both had 100 plus tackles. They were the only ones. That linebacking core was also atrocious. The D line was atrocious. The linebacking core was atrocious. They only had safety play. And you could say they had relatively decent corner play, but man, they actually feel like kind of one of the teams that we've talked about so far. Honestly, even more so than like the Texans or Jets, where it feels like they may actually have more holes than those teams, and that's tough to say. Thing is that unlike the Texans and Jets, is if their quarterback stays healthy, they've got a freaking good quarterback. So that leaves a lot up in the air. The last few things I'll say: Carl Lawson 5.5 sacks. No one else had more than 2, and also Carl Lawson's leaving, so that's not very great. Hubbard, Bynes, and Pratt had 5 TFLs. And how many quarterback hits do you think Carl Lawson had last season? If you come close to the correct number, I will be shocked.
3.
Well, he had 5.5 sacks, so he had more than 3 QB hits. Okay.
Uh,
You're
12.
gonna be amazed. You're gonna be shocked. I couldn't even believe this when I saw this. 32. He got 32 quarterback hits. He was the only one who was pressuring the quarterback at all, though. That's the issue. And now he's off the team. So, yeah, that's pretty up in the air. If you got any more stats you want to run through, you can. If not, we can move into players they added and lost, and you can lead us into that.
Yeah, you kind of covered everything that I wanted to say, so we could just go into their free agent gains and losses. With their signings, I think, well, definitely the biggest one for them was Trey Hendrickson. They get him for $15 million a year for 4 years. So they get their Carl Lawson replacement in that. And then they had some decent secondary signings too with Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton. I I think those were pretty good depth signings, especially Awuzie, who's still pretty young. I can't believe the Cowboys. Well, he was a second round pick, I think, not first round. So the Cowboys couldn't pick up his option, but they just let him go. And the Cowboys secondary is awful, and they let him go, and he was a decent guy. So he's not going to be a number one or number two like he was in Dallas, but number three role's great for him. Larry Ogunjobi comes in too, kind of a Geno Atkins replacement with that, getting stronger up front on their D line. And then Riley Reef, Eli Apple, and Ricardo Allen are the other three notable gains that I saw. Riley Reef probably being the best out of them, and just they get something on the O line.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with you. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with you. I agree with you on the Riley Reef thing. I mean, obviously the O line's terrible, so literally bringing in anybody makes it better. But the other stuff, I think Trey Hendrickson was a downgrade after I see what Carl Lawson did for this team last season.
Oh, no, he's definitely a downgrade.
It's imagine. Just I can't imagine. Yeah, he's younger, so that's what you get with an advantage there. I would say Larry Ogunjobi. I didn't see Geno Atkins last season. He didn't seem to have much of an impact. But
I think he was hurt most of the last season.
Yeah, that's probably it. But honestly, like I don't know if Larry Ogunjobi is the guy that's going to be the game changer that they want in the middle. I don't know about that either. Mike Hilton, Chidobe Awuzie, and you mentioned one other corner, Eli Apple. He didn't mention him, but I mean he could be good. But honestly, none of those three names are like high level elite cornerbacks. And I just think that they were already kind of sitting at the middle of the road, mediocre area for corner. They swapped out some D linemen. I don't think it made them much better or worse. And they got one offensive lineman. The one offensive lineman is kind of the only thing that changed much of anything, for my opinion of them. But even then, it's not like he's a terribly elite offensive lineman. He's just a decent guy, and that may help them a lot, but I don't know. I'm still got question marks just because it's only one guy. But they did do. I would say they did decently well in the draft, so we'll also have to talk about that before you talk about after you talk about some of their losses.
With their corners, I do agree that they're middle of the road kind of guys, but I like their approach of we're just going to bring in a bunch of these middle of the road corners and just chuck them out there and just see what sticks for positions. Because if one of the 3 or 4 guys that they bring in is even decent or above what his level was last season, then I think they kind of get a steal because they did not pay any of those guys a lot of money. The biggest payment was to Trey Hendrickson. And then their losses, Carl Lawson goes to the Jets. AJ Green, longtime Bengal, goes to the Cardinals. They trade Ryan Finley to the Texans, and then they release Geno Atkins and BJ Finney. I also saw, like, right before we started recording, when I was looking at stuff, that William Jackson was also a free agent loss for them too, so their secondary again takes a big hit. Not that he was fantastic in a lot of categories, but just he was someone that knew the system, it was there.
But he was mediocre, and they replaced him with mediocre. So that's why I don't see much change in it. They replaced Mackenzie Alexander and William Jackson. Mackenzie Alexander also left with 2 other guys. And if Eli Apple stays out of trouble, he'll be on the team. So maybe they have one more depth guy, but like really, I don't know how excited I am about this. Other guys I mentioned, Randy Bullock, but that's kind of a good loss, to be fair. Sean Williams. Sean Williams was important on special teams for them. I mean, he did run 2 fakes. Bobby Hart played tackle, so I don't know what they thought of Bobby Hart, but if he was any good, losing him for Riley Reef is not much of a trade-off. But I don't think like I said, I don't think Riley Reef is like a terribly elite offensive lineman, so I don't know if I even want to say that that's that big of a deal, like with that signing. Like I don't think any of their signings like blew me away. Their draft picks are going to need to have a really big impact for this team to improve much at all. They also lost John Ross, Gio Bernard. Gio Bernard was huge for them, and Alex Erickson, and their best linebacker. I said their linebackers sucked. The guy who was the best at the linebacker position was Josh Bynes, and he's not even getting re-signed. He's just a free agent. He's just sitting out there waiting.
Uh, yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh, geez, I lost my train of thought there.
It's okay. I don't know. I don't like the way that this team operated through free agency is not like anything that I would advise any team to do because they did not improve at all. If anything, they maintained status quo, and even then, they have more losses than they do acquisitions. So I don't see how you can even necessarily say that they maintain status quo.
Oh, I remember what I was gonna say. Riley Reef is definitely an upgrade over Bobby Hart because Bobby Hart signed with the Bills, so I looked at when he came to the Bills. I looked at what his film was. He led up like the most sacks in the NFL or close to the most sacks in the NFL last season. So it's definitely an upgrade for them in the Bobby Hart category. So that's just something
Fair.
that you shouldn't question. Bobby Hart was like one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL last season.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I will give them credit. They picked 3 offensive linemen in the draft, which is good. Very good. You want me to go through draftees
Sure.
first? All right. Jamar Chase, great player, wrong position. We've discussed this at length. There's no way that it was before we even watched it back, but now that we watched it back, it's even more obvious. There's no way that you can look at that and say, okay, there's elite player A and elite player B. Elite player A is a guy that we're familiar with at a position we don't really need, and player B is a guy that's elite, but he's unfamiliar with us. We don't have any ties to him, so we're not going to draft him, and we're going to go for player A just because we know him better. That was dumb. Just because he's Joe Burrow's friend is not a good reason to pick him. You need to draft a lineman with how terrible that was. Now, I was happy to see that they did continue to go linemen after that. And actually, I'll go a little out of order here because I kind of want to talk about the linemen all at once. Jackson Carman from Clemson, and then Dante Smith kept bolstering the O-line. And lastly, also Trey Hill to bolster the offensive line. They grabbed 1 center, 1 guard, and 1 tackle, according to what I was looking at. I think Carmen was listed as a guard, but he could be a tackle too. I think from other stuff I've seen, I'm happy that they at least were like, okay, this was a big issue. We need to add a lot at this position. I just hate that they didn't just like pick the best guy early, like. There was no doubt that he was at least he seems like as much of a can't miss prospect as a player could be, even more so than Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is pretty close to that, but Penei Sewell's even more so. And just when they were hurting that bad for a lineman, I cannot believe that they went Jamar Chase instead, especially with how Joe Burrow gets injured, because everybody wants to complain that running quarterbacks get hurt running. No. Quarterbacks just get hurt standing in the pocket and taking a beating, like when somebody lands on your knee and snaps it backwards. That's how they get hurt. So maybe by getting some more linemen we can prevent that, but instead we have Jamar Chase. So hopefully Jamar Chase can always be the number 1 option because like I told you earlier, they are only allowed 1 read on this team with how quickly the pass rush gets to Burrow. Then it's a sack. The other guys to talk about. Joseph Osai, I thought he was a good pick for where he was taken, honestly. We don't like the edge, so I mean, we don't like the edge players, so not crazy about him, but like where he was taken, all right, that's fine. Cameron Sample is another guy needed at the defensive line because that defensive line and linebacking core was so weak that they went out and grabbed him, which was good, but honestly, he just seems like a strong guy. Like he doesn't have many moves. He was coming off the edge though, and that's basically what I said about him. He's strong, but he doesn't have many moves at all. Just kind of like if he wasn't blocked was kind of the only time it felt like he got to the quarterback. Tyler Shelvin is an interior defensive lineman, so they did grab somebody besides Larry Ogunjobi to play on the interior finally in the defensive line room. But he is basically his only character trait is that he's massive. He's 6'2", 350. I mean, he's just big, and I don't feel like there's much else to his play besides that. Then Before I get back to another D lineman they took Evan McPherson, kicker. Um, they haven't, like, the entire time we've been alive, they haven't been like set at the kicker position ever. So hopefully taking this guy, who I don't know much about, you were much more educated on the kickers, so you could probably tell me a bit more about him. But I hopefully taking this guy, they finally get a guy that's like a long-term kicker for them, because they haven't had that position set once while I've been alive, and it from my perspective. Then Chris Evans is a running back they took that seems like the Gio Bernard replacement. He's from Michigan, and he's kind of a slim kid. I don't know. It didn't seem like he catch the ball like he caught the ball too smoothly. But you know it's interesting. I mean, he's a slimmer guy, and I think the frame was kind of what attracted him to them, because he's less like a Joe Mixon or a Samaje Perine. And then Wyatt Huber was the last guy they took, and honestly, he may be my favorite value pick for them. And he's a speed rush guy, and I mean, there's not much variety in how he pass rushes, but I mean, nowadays with how it seems to be in the modern NFL, you want speed rush guys coming off the edge, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had a decent season if they let him in the games a decent amount. And also, he was really good at strip sacking the quarterbacks. UDFAs, I don't have anything specific to say on them. Just three names I'll mention. Puka Williams is a running back who I've heard about. Don't know much about him, just a name I've heard, so he could be interesting for them. Drew Chrisman is a punter, so punter acquisition that could be important for them. And Colin Hill was a QB UDFA, and I only mention that because I'm pretty sure they only had 2 QBs on roster, so I guess that he probably makes the roster.
Yeah. All right. I'll go through it now. Jamar Chase. I can't really say anything that you didn't say. Great player, just phenomenal talent. Wrong position. Just how do you not take Penei Sewell there? It's just so frustrating to see a team, because if the Bengals get Penei Sewell there, they're already going to be very interesting to watch with just the stockpile of weapons that they have on that team. But giving Joe Burrow time to throw the ball and seeing him showcase his talent, which it will be like a full almost 2 years since we've seen that, him in LSU, and then actually being able to showcase it fully, being able to have more than half a second to throw. That would be amazing. But Jamar Chase is here now, and I mean, yeah, I guess you got that chemistry there. Hopefully he can get open when he's the number one read instantly so they can score, but geez, I just feel bad for Joe Burrow, even though he might have had something to do with that, but Jackson Carr of Clemson, I liked what I saw of him when I looked through offensive linemen during leading up to the draft. Not really much I could say on offensive linemen. It's just, yeah, he's good pick there. Joseph Osai, I completely agree with you. Talent-wise, he was like, I saw him graded a lot, like late first, early second from where he was going. And to pick him up in the third, that's just some good value for him. And even you and I both didn't agree that he should be highly rated. I think he was more middle lower the pack for us, just because his only trait is, yeah, he can run around guys fast, and he also isn't that technical with a lot of stuff and makes some dumb decisions sometimes. But third round pick on a guy that's uber athletic like he is, that's great. Cam Sample, he's a bigger guy, strength. I mean, I think it'd be easier to teach him technique because he'll actually have to rely on that. In, hey, you're going to use your strength in a way that's technical. Osai can just run around guys. You don't have that.
I thought it was really funny, the sample to the Shelvin here, because I'm like I say the thing about Sample and I'm like, wait a minute, which guy am I talking about? Because they pick 2 guys in a row that are basically just strength things. Like they pick the edge guy whose strength, like his strength is one of his main features for his size, and then they just double down on it and say the guy that's even bigger and stronger in the middle. Like they just picked 2 guys in a row that were purely based off strength.
Yeah, and Shelvin was my worst graded interior defensive lineman when I looked at him, because I went back and looked at my list. Tyler Shelvin, that name sounds familiar. I'm like, yeah. And the one thing I wrote is like, it's just because this dude's big. That's the only reason why. It's because he's a big nose tackle that you have to like run around. like 8 feet wide of man in order to not get like touched by him just because he's gigantic. But
This is a similar. This is a very stupid comparison, but this is just something I want to butt in and say really quick. Sorry. No, this is like the concept of what I did when I was a little kid. And I played like the Wii version of Sonic versus Mario Winter Olympics or something. And just whenever I played the hockey game, I just always put Bowser in the net just because I was like, well, I mean, he's massive. I mean, how are they going to get the puck past him?
yeah, exactly.
Just throw a huge body there. Doesn't matter if he can even move. Just put the body there.
No, and it's gonna be something where we have to like double team this guy, not because he's good or anything, but just if he falls forward, he's gonna crush our center if he lines up right over top of him.
He's gonna tear somebody else's quarterback's ACL if he falls right at the perfect time.
Just rolling into him. So that's just a weird pick. I could not have imagined him going in the fourth when I watched his film because it's just, dude, that's a good 7th-round flyer right there. Like, this dude's just gigantic. Let's bring him in to stuff up some holes.
The thing is like, he's only 6'2", though. So it's like, how many D linemen, like, aren't that height? Like, if you wanted that, you could pick a good D lineman and then be like, put 50 pounds on. Like, that would have been easier than picking yeah, you're right. That would have been a better idea than picking this guy in the 4th round, honestly. Or whatever round it was. I think it was the 4th.
Yeah, he's 6'2", but he's 7'8" wide. So it's just weird. Deontay Smith out of East Carolina. Again, just stock up offensive linemen. I think, I do like their D-line picks that they made, except Shelvin. But if you're going to take Jamar Chase with the first overall pick, every single pick after that should have just been an offensive lineman because one of these guys has to work. Well, at least 2 of them.
Yeah,
at least 2 of them have to hit.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like they picked a decent number of O-linemen, but the thing is it felt like all 5 of the offensive linemen were questionable. So if we slide Riley Reiff in, and then we say, okay, the round 2 pick works, and he plays well, that still leaves 3 positions on the offensive line that we're really still worried about. So it's like, well, if you went O-line early 1st round and 2nd round, at least it becomes the majority offensive lineman you are confident in, rather than the minority being that you would have Riley Reiff, Penei Sewell, potentially Jackson Carman, and then you have 3 guys out of 5 instead of 2 guys out of 5 that you're confident in.
Yeah, it's just tough.
There's 3 receivers in the receiving room that I'm already confident in that aren't named Jamar Chase. So.
Yep. I just wish the Bengals would also see that way. Evan McPherson out of Florida, the kicker. He was your number 1 ranked kicker when we ranked him.
Okay.
I can tell you forgot that because
good. I know what I'm talking about.
Nah, he was my number 2 ranked kicker. The dude has a bunch of leg, and that was something that Randy Bullock really struggled with. He just wasn't getting it there, and he also wasn't accurate. McPherson his accuracy's iffy, but that kid can boom it from like 65 yards out. So,
do you agree with me that the Bengals have not had like a solid or like even like reliable kicker the entire time we've been alive?
I mean, when I think of Bengals kicker, the first name that comes to my head is Mike Nugent. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, like no. Okay, good. We're on the same page.
So Evan McPherson, he was in our top 2 for kickers, so obviously he's the best. Trey Hill, center, Georgia. I mean, yeah, just get another offensive lineman. I do like that they hit 3 different positions with their O-line picks, though. Guard, tackle, and then center. Just trying to spread it out. I mean, it would have been nice if you took 6 more of those, but whatever. Chris Evans, I observed the same thing you saw. He's not as compact as Mixon and P. Ryan. He's more lankier and receiving threat, even though it's not as smooth. Like, you could just tell that he just looks uncomfortable catching the ball, but he's like
screen pass.
Yeah, and his main thing is just I think that same clip where he like bobbles the screen pass, the announcer just goes, "Yep, he's known for catching it." And I'm like, what? It looks so unnatural him doing it.
Oh,
so I mean, if they could get get that down, get him in front of the jugs machine constantly. That'd be nice. And then Wyatt Hubert from Kansas State, bringing in another edge rusher. I mean, can't really complain. Just strengthen up because they're weak on both their lines. So, I mean, you could have gone another offensive lineman here, but grabbing a 7th round offensive lineman, you're really hoping and praying that he makes the team. I think a defensive lineman has a better chance of making that team than 7th round flyer on an O lineman does.
Yeah, you like him?
Yeah, I do like him.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Any undrafted free agents? No, I mean, probably not.
I mean, I saw that quarterback. I watched a little bit of him, and I was like, oh, geez, the Bengals only have 2 guys, so they're kind of in like a Packers situation instead of bringing in Blake Bortles, because that might cause some quarterback controversy, which is what the Packers did. They just pick up a UDFA.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So for the opponents they have this season, I guess the one thing I'll say before we get to the opponents that I didn't really get to reiterate, their best linebacker is gone. He's just not even getting re-signed. They really looked at the O-line and D-line and said, these were weaknesses of ours, which are true. They tried to fill those in, so I'll give them credit for that. But they just completely disregarded linebacker entirely, and I have to imagine that that's going to hurt them fairly badly this season because they can't have Von Bell and Jesse Bates be playing fake linebacker the entire year when they're 15 yards off the ball or 12 yards off the ball or whatever it is. They're not linebackers. That's not a replacement for linebackers, and defensive linemen aren't replacements for linebackers either. They have no one at that position, and even though we're starting with the 5 worst teams according to last season, the Bengals linebacking core is probably the worst positional group we have seen on any team so far, like at all. Mm-hmm. It's that bad. And even then, the worst part of it is that even though they got the O lineman and the D lineman, we have one position that's guaranteed to be bad, and we've got 2 other positions that are still question marks. And I wouldn't say like tight end too. Like even though they've got receivers, tight end's a question mark. There's way too many like question marks on this team, and it's tough, man. I don't think that they're gonna be too good. I guess with what I'm saying, I may be giving them more wins than are expected of them, but man, I don't know. Like they're lucky they're a 4th place team because that gives them some easier competition because they're 4th in their division. But yeah, I mean like roster wise, what I'm gonna give them for wins is not as high as I would expect them. And actually, I forgot to pull up the over under. So if you want to see if you could find an over under really quick, I'll run through the games I have while you're doing that, and then we'll see where it matches up for that. But home games, Baltimore and Cleveland, I think those are 2 very easy losses for them because I just don't think that they could compete with those teams. The roster's not even close to as talented as them. And then they're going to have Baltimore and Cleveland on the road as well. Those are also going to be losses. So the only game in the division that I'll give them is I'll say they can beat Pittsburgh once, and then the second time on the road, honestly, Pittsburgh's still not a team that I still got a lot of question marks. When I watch them play, it's just like this could break down at any time. So I'll give them 1 win against Pittsburgh, and I'll give them a toss-up against Pittsburgh. So that's better than 1 win and 1 loss. But then getting back to the home games they have, they got to play it. They got to play the Packers at home. If Rodgers doesn't get moved, that's an L. If he does, that's a toss-up. Then Kansas City, L. Los Angeles being the Chargers. Herbert's gonna. I'm imagining with that team at full strength and Herbert, that team's gonna be a lot better this season. So I'm gonna say that's an L. Then there's the one other team that I'll say I don't. This team is gonna be interesting to watch. They've got a lot of pieces. It's going to be they're going to be one of the teams that I'm really interested to do the video for because I'm just really going to need to analyze them a lot to see whether last year was a down year or last year was an accurate year, and that's the Vikings. I'm gonna give the Bengals at this point the win against the Vikings, and then the last two games they have as home games are Jacksonville. Jacksonville, I'll say toss up, but I'm kind of leaning more Jacksonville there, and then I'll say San Francisco's a loss for them. So right now that puts us with the home games and uh, the three road games being the interdivision road games. That puts us with two guaranteed wins, three toss-up games, I think, depending on the Rodgers situation. Let's say Rodgers gets moved for this case. Um, I'll go with that because that's what I'm honestly expecting. I'm not expecting him to be a Packer at least, so I don't think he'll be on the Packers. So it really doesn't matter if he gets moved or if he just doesn't play. Let's say he gets moved. And then that gives them three toss-up games. So they're kind of sitting at like 3.5 wins right now with 6 games remaining, correct? And I think the Bears are going to be very good because I think they'll have at least mediocre quarterback play, and they were a good team with bad quarterback play, so I think that's a loss to the Bears. I think they can beat Denver. I think they can beat Detroit, and I think they can beat the New York Jets. But lastly, I think they'll lose to the Las Vegas Raiders, and that finishes them out at, let's see, what was that? I said 3.5 before, added 3 wins. 6.5. Since one of the toss-up games was against Rodgers, and they could have Rodgers, I'll round that down and I'll say 6-11 for these guys. Do you have an over/under?
Yes, the over/under is 6.5.
What a shocker. So, nope, not a strong feeling either way. But honestly, if I had to lean one way with this team, I really don't see a world where they're like even 8 wins would probably be pretty good for this team, just because there are a lot of holes still. So if they're gonna heavily favor one side of that at all, I would say the under, because I don't see a lot of chances where they win. Like if they won 10 games, I would be shocked, just because there's so many holes on this team. Whereas other teams we've talked about at least have tried to fill in their holes. They tried to fill in some of their holes, but there's still other blatant holes. So I'm just this team is very worrisome, and I'd say under, not a strong under, but at the same time, I would be a lot less shocked if they won only 3 games next year than if they won 8 games. I would be a lot more surprised if they won 8 games than if they only won 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Uh, Me going into the schedule for their division games, I have them being swept by Baltimore, swept by Cleveland, and then they split it with Pittsburgh, winning one at home and then losing the away game. Then for their home games, I have them losing to Kansas City, losing to the Chargers. The Minnesota game was tough for me. That was tough to decide, but Minnesota's more well-rounded team, so I gave the Bengals the L there on that.
Yeah.
But things can change between that then and now. The Jags game, I had the Bengals getting the win in that, and then losing to San Fran and Green Bay. Yeah, I think even if the Packers move on from Jordan Love,
From
the
Rodgers.
Packers, from Rodgers, yeah, move on to Jordan Love. Their defense is still just stout enough to harass Joe Burrow, or even if he's still playing quarterback, knock on wood, just who was ever under center for them, there's going to be so much pressure that it's going to be hard to get the ball to playmakers. So right then that has them with 2 wins, rounding out the divisional games and the home games, and then going to their away games. I have them losing to Chicago because, like you said, they were winning games with bad quarterback play, and if they get mediocre quarterback play, it's only going to get better. And that defense is still good. Khalil Mack's going to have a field day against an offensive line
Lord.
that's weak like theirs.
That's gonna be horrible to watch for Bengals fans. That's gonna be miserable, especially if Justin Fields is in by that time. The Bears could potentially slaughter the Bengals like terribly. And the Bengals aren't. I don't think the Bengals are a 2-win team. Like I said, I think they're a 6-win team. But they like that matchup. Holy crap, that could go horrible.
Yeah, yeah. I have them losing to Vegas, and then closing it out with 3 wins, beating Denver, beating Detroit, and beating the Jets.
Yeah.
So that closes them out 5-12 for me.
Yeah. Like I said, it really it really helps that they're a fourth place team. If they had some
Hmm.
different opponents, wow.
Yeah.
Uh yeah, they're getting lucky with some wins here just because of some of their matchups. Another game that I didn't really mention. If Cleveland could be miserable too. Cleveland could be
Hmm.
another game where, kind
Yes.
of similar to the Bears, they could just get absolutely annihilated.
Hmm.
Like, oh my gosh, it could be bad.
Yeah, Cleveland's going to be a brutal game. Like the whole AFC North, well, not the whole, just the Browns and the Ravens. It's going to be brutal for Pittsburgh and uh, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati to make games competitive between those teams. Like when the Bengals played the Steelers, that's going to be some fun football because it's just going to be like Big Ben showing like, yeah, I'm still on top of this division, even though he isn't. And the bank and Joe Burrow just like, get out of here, old man. So that's
This
going to be fun. But div- that division just has like a gap between 1 and 2, and then big gap 3 and 4.
the Steelers started 11-0 last season to show us then that everything could break down if their short passing game starts slowly. They don't have much to go to after that. The only time they didn't fully fail by not having a short passing game was against the Colts. Against the Colts, they managed to get some deeper throws down the field going, to have something besides just a short passing game because they have no run game to speak of either. Uh, I think this season could be a shocker for Steelers fans. But the thing is, they've got Mike Tomlin as a coach. Really like Mike Tomlin. Um, so honestly, if Ben is playing poor enough, I could see a world where he's willing to go to Rudolph or something, and it may actually help them just get to 500 or something. But 500 is a lot harder now that it's 8-1 and not
Yeah.
and not just 8-8.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not even Rudolph. They brought in Dwayne Haskins for a reason.
That's true. He could. He could. Who knows? He gets the best out of those guys when they're there. I mean, they can be troublemakers and he still gets them to play well. I mean, we didn't know about issues with Antonio Brown. We didn't know about much of any issues with Le'Veon Bell while they were there. Keeps things quiet. That's really impressive with them. So even though I'm not high on their team, that'll be another one. I already mentioned the Vikings will be an interesting one to do. Pittsburgh will be another interesting one to do.
Yes, yes.
All right, all set?
Yeah, I think we can cut it here.